Welcome to the show, Ryan. So good to see you. Had
Thank
your
you.
had your dad on recently, Christopher Bledsoe. If you guys have not seen that episode, I highly suggest that you check it out because I had Ryan's dad on, Chris Bledsoe. We talked about his amazing, I mean, it's an extraordinary story um, about his experience with a phenomenon that we're going to talk about today. And he recently wrote a book called The UFO of God. Basically outlines his entire experience from the point of when this began all the way through up until present day. And the phenomenon didn't just affect Chris. It affected his whole family. It wasn't just him who saw these things and experienced these things. It was his entire family. And so I wanted to bring this amazing soul onto my podcast, Ryan Bledsoe, and kind of get his perspective on what it was like growing up experiencing the phenomenon and get his story with everything that he's experienced. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Ryan. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here. Yeah, I've been really looking forward to this and looking forward to the part two when you come on our show as well. So, yeah,
Yes, that's not going to be long from now. November 18th.
yeah,
I'm coming up to you. I mean, we all live in the same state. I went up to see Chris in person, and now I'm going to go and see you in person and do an episode on your podcast, Bledsoe Said So. So make
yeah,
sure that you guys check out Ryan's podcast. It's amazing. Um, and see what we can experience too when we're up there. We'll
yeah.
talk
Pray for
about
good
it.
weather.
Yeah, I know. I've been night watching myself. I
Mm-hmm.
go out now ever since I went and visited your dad, and I've had some random things happen,
Okay.
and I
I was gonna
don't.
ask.
Yeah, it was actually kind of funny because the night after I went to go and visit your dad told me that once you experience the phenomenon, you can normally experience it again. You don't have to be with him in order to experience it. And
Mhm.
so the next night, I had called your dad and I was like, I'm night watching tonight. And he goes, I'm night watching tonight too. And he goes, let me know if you see anything and we can track and see if we're seeing the same thing. And I think there was like four of them that we had saw at the same time. Like every time
Mhm.
we saw one, I'm like, it's going southeast. Do you see it? And he's like, oh yeah, I see it. And so I was
Yeah.
like, man, this is just, it's wild. Cause I've never had an experience before
Mhm.
that time. I had prayed and hoped that, I mean, I've literally had UFO posters all my life. Like I've just been drawn to that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And for so long, I'm like, please let me know if this is real. I want to believe. I want to believe. And then, I go and visit your dad one night and I'm just like blown away. So before we dive into all the good stuff, why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself and where my audience can find you?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So, my name is Ryan Bledsoe. I'm the youngest son of Chris Bledsoe Sr. As Avery said, he's been on the show before, so you guys are probably familiar with him by now. He just came out with his book, UFO of God. Also, just came out with a mind blowing History Channel episode on Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, episode 8, Chris Bledsoe. It's just called Chris Bledsoe. So, as for myself, I am the host of Bledsoe Said So Podcast. We've been going about 2 years now. Long story short, we can get into this a little later, but when I was 18 years old, which I'm 30 now, so that's quite a while, my dad tells me, he's like, son, I get this very strong feeling like this message from the phenomenon. And for anybody who's like, what does that mean? Watch the History Channel episode. You'll see the proof with the brain scans, the EEG caps, how they're proving without a shadow of a doubt that his mind is receiving some form of communication from these entities. And he goes, they've indicated to me that you're going to tell the story. You're going to maybe write a book or this or that or the other. So in my head, I'm like, how can I do this? How can I do this? So here I am. I've been doing the podcast for 2 years. It's been going better than I could have imagined. I mean, we've had some pretty cool guests, and here I am, on this show. It's the things like that are like, wow, like, I never get used to this kind of stuff. And it's just, we're having a blast and we're telling the story. And, we like to like throw a mix in there too, like esoteric, nerdy topics, dissecting movies with all the occult symbolism and talking about different wisdom and mystery traditions, UFOs, paranormal, you name it. We covered all. And that's who I am in a nutshell.
I think that's actually amazing that you guys are out there telling your story. You're not afraid of, what people. I mean, this whole community is. I feel like we all want to believe, but
Yeah.
obviously, with the age of technology and how much people can manipulate video and just really want to become the next Instagram star or have the next viral video. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
so many people put so much junk out there and it's so hard to figure out what's real and what isn't real?
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
your dad, I mean, if you go look at his Instagram account, he posts so many videos and it's not even a fraction of
Of
what
what
he
he
has
has.
collected.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why your dad's story was so powerful to me because without experiencing the phenomenon, his story seems very sensational. You're almost kind of like,
Yeah.
you know, this is this how have I not like heard about this or why
Hmm.
isn't this like being covered by the news and all this other stuff because he has it seems like he has like a relationship with this phenomenon and it seems to interact with him on command. Like he can he can call on these. And when we say phenomenon, what I'm talking about is, and you can probably chime in too, because
Hmm.
I probably don't have as much of a knowledge of it as you do, but he sees a lot of these like orbs, and the orbs, what he says are, entities. They are an intelligence, and he has described them as spirits or angels. Um, I mean, is that really like how would you describe this phenomenon?
Well, okay, so for years, like this all started in 2007 officially. I mean, there was a sighting that we had in about 2003, and long story short, so the property that we lived at when all this stuff started, it's in the book. I'm gonna spare all these incredible minute details, but Dad does detail all this in the book. How we fell in really hard times, around 2003, 4, 5, around that time, and he lost his like incredibly successful construction and real estate empire in Fayetteville and just collapsed. And like we literally, I remember being a little kid and it's just like I learned what bankruptcy meant because we went through bankruptcy, and like so we were just desperate to get out of Dodge and downsize because my parents were just falling on such hard times financially. So we're at my grandfather's house, who eventually became our next door neighbor, and we're scoping out this plot of land. He had a 6-acre land, and he's like, son, to my dad, he's like, son, you can build on here. You can build on, next door on our land. And, it's no problem. So we're out there one night about 2003 and we're looking at the lot. Dad's also like, he does the architecture. He can do the building, all of it. He literally did all of it. So he drew up the plans for our house, was mapping it out. It's like, here's where we're going to build this, that, and the other. And as we're all out there, it also happened to be like Thanksgiving weekend where all of our family was in town and we were together. There was a pretty large crowd of us, and we all saw this thing fly over us. It looked like a big green blimp, but it clearly wasn't a blimp. I mean, it was very low over our head, and it was silent, and it had these like red lights on it. And we kind of never really talked about it much until many years later, because just around the corner, all this stuff in 2007 with the Cape Fear River started, and then it was like, we forgot about that. But yeah, so it really started a little earlier than 2007. Moving forward, all this stuff happens in 2007, and for the last I guess 17 years now, this January, we've been having these experiences, and we can go as deep as you want into this. Long story short, we've come to the conclusion that they are benevolent, um, angelic, you could say, very positive, loving entities with the things that have happened around us. So I've just put a lot of thought into it, and I'm like, people really get so upset about the A word. And I'm not talking about alien, I'm talking about angel. You know,
Mhm.
people get really upset when you talk about things that are related to spiritual phenomenon in the UFO um, fan base or whatever you want to call it. So I just was like, every time I've ever seen them, they look like light. They're good. When you think from like a philosophical, mystical, esoteric, whatever perspective, you know, why don't I just call them light being? I think that's something that's a little more neutral that people can uh, grasp onto without that just aggressive disgust for religion that exists in modern society. So I just call them light beings. Dad likes to call them angel. He's a little more old fashioned, and that's totally okay. In reality, that is what they are. But I don't know. I think people react really well to light beings. So that's what I've been calling them.
Have
Did that
you
answer your question?
yes, but I do have another question about that too. With the with I mean, have you ever had any I know that these and or these this phenomenon or these entities communicate with your father
Hmm.
like telepathically, and they send him more images in order to, communicate. They're like,
Sometimes words. Don't let them fool you. Sometimes there's words. Very clear. Yeah.
well, I was thinking in my mind, I'm like, has have they ever explained what they are? Like, have
Hmm.
you ever had the like telepathic communication with them as well?
No, but look, this sounds ridiculous. I'm very aware of this, but it is what it is. Here we are down the rabbit hole. I have had several dreams where the entities were present that were incredibly profound to me, that changed my life. Some of these dreams have come true already. Some of them are in the process of coming true. Like, for example, I've had this reoccurring dream since I was 18 years old. Again, I'm 30 now, so this is 12 years I'm having this reoccurring dream where I'm standing in front of crowds of people and I'm like pointing up to the sky, like, look, I told you they're real. And people are seeing them. And like, I don't know, Avery, it's a little weird, like you're showing up and there's many others who have shown up and they're seeing them. Dad goes to this festival just like the week after you were. Did he tell you about this? Did you talk to him?
Mhm. Mhm.
He went to this festival and there were 75 people there that saw them. And we're working on, building up to bigger crowds and seeing if we can share this with as many people as possible. And I'm just saying, like, very strange to me that this reoccurring dream that I've had for the last 12 years is starting to come true. And there's others too. There's other dreams that I've had. I've never had the experience that Dad has had where they've put something clearly in my brain in the form of an image in the waking state, but I have consciously and clearly seen entities with my eyes in the waking state. I've seen them.
Mhm.
The connection, I haven't figured out exactly how to, develop that part yet. And sometimes I wonder if that's because I haven't had the same level of like hypnotherapy that Dad's had,
Mm.
the sort of regressive, uh, like hypnotic regression where they
Mhm.
suggest that you're more open to remembering these experiences and this, that, and the other. When Dad had his original encounter in 2007, again, this is all in the book, so I'm not going to go in this part. I'm not going to. It's a lot of details, but I'm gonna summarize. He has his original encounter. He sees these entities. He's first he sees the balls of fire. He's missing for 4 hours. He comes back, and then they start seeing all these entities and all that for about a year and a half before the Discovery Channel came in and did their documentary investigation on us, and then he had his hypnotic regression. He couldn't remember a lot of that missing time or any of it at all. Really, there was a lot he couldn't remember, and then following the hypnotic regression, he was able to remember all of it, and his connection just exploded from there in intensity. So sometimes I wonder if all four of us kids had the same treatment, would there be a lot of missing time things that we could recover? I don't know. But
Have you experienced a lot of like missing time?
I
Uh
mean, the thing is, you don't know if you did. You
yeah.
don't really know.
So let's talk about your experience after, like, how old were you when Chris had the 2007
I was 13.
event? So you were 13. So you
I
were
was in
pretty
eighth
young.
grade. Yep.
And you weren't it was Chris Jr.
Hmm.
who was there during the experience, but you weren't there. How long after the experience did you experience the phenomenon?
Oh, right away. So,
Wow.
okay. So here's how that went down. So Dad and Chris Jr. have their experiences that night, and my grandmother should be 90 very soon. God bless her. And she's just like healthy as can be.
I love that.
She's a widow for like the last 30 or 40 years, and she just has this thing about not being at the house alone. She's never could be alone. She has this incredible fear of the darkness and being alone at night. So someone's always staying with her when my uncle who lives with her is out of town. So at this particular time, my mom and then my sister and my brother and I happened to be staying with her. We were across town. We were not at our house when this went on. So my dad and my brother go through the weekend after having these experiences, freaking out. I get off the school bus on Monday, just days after it happened, and Dad starts telling me, and Junior, my brother, immediately, 13-year-old kids, they just have a sense that's, or any young kid, they have a sense that you can feel. I know my dad's telling me the truth. I can see it in his eyes. You're a kid anyway, so you believe in magical things and whatnot. So I never had a problem accepting it. And I mean, I can't remember because it was 17 years ago, but I feel like, it was right away. I don't know if it was weeks or months, but hundreds of times Dad would barge in our room. Get up, get up. It's 4 a.m. Get up. They're out. They're outside right now. Come look. He was desperate to be believed. And I feel like every time we went out there, except maybe a few times in the beginning that we didn't see anything, we saw orbs right away. I've been seeing them right away from the beginning since 2007 when it all started. Never questioned, just always right from the jump. I was experiencing it and believing it wholeheartedly. And it's dramatically increased since then. Back then, we might see one light in the night sky and it's like, oh my God, And now
Yeah.
it's like, I don't know how many you saw when you were there, but we might see 50 and it's like, wow, great show.
Yeah.
Just total desensitization.
How did that affect you at age 13? Like, tell me what has happened since the age of 13. What kind of things have you experienced during that time, and how has it changed your whole perspective on like religion, and how has it like affected you personally?
So I grew up Pentecostal, and for those who don't know what Pentecostal is, that is an extremely strict form of Christianity. It's like if you imagine a spectrum, respectfully, if you imagine a spectrum of Christianity that goes all the way down to like, you know, mega church, it's not really that strict, just showing up, we're partying on Sunday, all the way up to like Amish, where you live in these ascetic communities away from society and you have these strict regulations. I was probably like top 3 level of that spectrum. Pentecostal is just a couple levels below Amish. It's extremely strict. It's extremely, women can't cut their hair. They have to wear skirts all the way down to their ankles. You can't have piercings. You can't wear makeup. Men have to wear suits to church, and you have to be this and that. Men have to cut their hair. It's extremely strict. You know what I mean? So the point is, I was very Christian, very, very, very Christian. At 13 years old, I started having these experiences, and I started to realize, why am I going to church and I'm never hearing about this? Why is why is the church saying that this is evil? They're telling me this is demonic. But my dad and my siblings and I were seeing them, and they're telling my dad that they're here to help and that they serve creation and that they're the guardians of all life. But then we go talk to people in our religious community and they don't want anything to do with it. And they want to shun us and mock us and revile us and hate us. And then you go talk to the people online who are UFO fanatics. I mean, we're talking 2007, Avery. YouTube just came out. Facebook just came out. People had flip phones and Nextel walkie-talkies. It wasn't really many iPhones around. I mean, I was in school in 2007, and I think a couple of rich kids had iPhones. You know what I mean? It was a totally different world. And you look on the TV, and everything about UFOs was all critters with anal probes and these spinning saucers with anti-gravity propulsion technology and this and that and the other, but no video evidence or proof of any of it. Meanwhile, we're really having these experiences being studied by NASA and all that. So I started to question early on, like, I think they're all not telling the whole story here. Certainly, it's not all aliens and nuts and bolts, but certainly, the Bible that was written 2,000 years ago can't have every secret of the universe between, before it was written, while it was written, and after it was written for all time. So I started to question really early, something's not adding up here. What I'm experiencing personally with my family is not adding up to anything I have seen or that I have heard, you know? So I spent
Mm-hmm.
the next 17 years of my life until now dedicating myself to studying as much as I could about mysticism, ancient esoteric philosophies, wisdom traditions, trying to find every little crumb that I could that aligned with our experiences and helped me understand it and explain it to other people in a way that makes sense, because it's very daunting. Like I said, you say the A word, people freak out. I'm not very religious. I believe in aliens. I believe in this and that and the other. Well, okay, it's like, what else do you want me to say? Like, this is what it is. So, yeah, I
Have
mean,
you? I mean,
yeah,
that's actually interesting perspective that you brought up there. I'm gonna try and find this thing that I
you
saw
can
the other
say
day.
you can say alien all day. People be like, "Oh, cool, yeah, tell me more about it." You say angel, they're like, I don't believe that. I'm not into
It's
that.
it's so weird to me that we can read the Bible and read all of the miracles that happened, all the visions that happened, all the prophetic
Spinning
like
balls of fire that come down
yeah,
and
the
things come out of
clouds, the
them.
chariots, the all this stuff that in your own mind obviously you would think that that's they're obviously experiencing something. Like they talk about angels, they talk about demons and good and evil, and but yet if it happens in today's society, it's like automatically it's the devil,
Hmm.
right? And it's like we if we even experience something like that, we have been programmed to believe that it's something that's evil, right?
Yeah.
And especially if we're relating this to aliens and UFOs and that kind of stuff, then already we're perceiving it off of all the movies that we've watched. I mean,
Hmm.
I watched Fire in the Sky when I was little, and that was the movie that absolutely terrified me when it came to aliens, because I thought you get abducted by aliens and they take you to the ship and they probe you and they do surgeries on you and all
Extract
that kind of stuff.
samples and you
Yeah,
know.
and it's terrifying, right? And then you saw how it affected him afterwards. He was terrified, and that's usually the what we see. And there's so many abduction cases that talk about that occurring to them. That they like probe them, they did surgery on them, and I don't know. All the stories are interesting because when Chris said that he had a lapse in time, um, I don't think I've heard his story of what he remembers from that lapse of time. Did he
You
get
still haven't.
abducted?
Yeah, okay, you want to go into that?
Yeah, I would love to.
Okay. So 2007, right? That's January 8th. I always remember that because it's Elvis's birthday. Very convenient. And anyway, so he's out there in the Cape Fear River, which is, because I guess you're from North Carolina. It runs
Mhm.
like pretty much all the way through the state. So he's out there on one of the accesses in Fayetteville. It's very dark, very secluded. I mean, for those who aren't familiar to the South, I mean, there are a lot of very rural areas where there's no street lights for miles, a lot of dirt roads sometimes, or like cornfields, and it's just dark. It's not like in the city where there's lights constantly and you can see it polluting the sky. We're talking dark. And he's driving down about maybe a half a mile deep into thick woods to get in this huge clearing that's in it's we're not when I say cul-de-sac, I don't mean like a paved street. I mean, like, imagine you're so deep in the woods that there's a clearing that's like a cul-de-sac circle, and then on the other side of it is the river. Again, massive river for those who are not familiar. Okay, so we're setting the scene here. He's out in the woods in the dark, fishing, and well, it's almost dark. It's January. It gets dark around 5:30, 5 o'clock. So it's just before dark. The sun is setting. Dad's not really having a good time. And again, all this minute detail that I'm gonna just kind of summarize about his hard times is in the book. I want to keep it about the phenomenon, but he was just on very hard times and he was very depressed. He was at the end of his rope, like basically just was contemplating if he wanted to live anymore. He was just that depressed. And he just walks away from the group, and he's just like, I just want to go clear my head and just walk through the woods, you know? And he's kind of praying, like, God, like, I'm just at the end of my rope. Like, I could really use some help. Like, please, like, help me out, heal me, or just take me away from here. Like, I can't bear this, suffering anymore. As he starts walking through the woods, he starts to hear these sounds in the bushes. And for those who are not familiar with like hunting culture, it's very extreme in North Carolina. My dad grew up literally in the woods sometimes, put out there without a flashlight to test his grit, see if he could find his way home in the dark. I mean, it's very, you're out there at 4 a.m. before the sun's up, you're hunting deer, bear, whatever, and it's not like the woods were a scary thing to him. He had the record for killing one of the largest bears ever in North Carolina, several, like maybe 20 years ago or so. But I say all that to say, for the first time in his life, he started to get chills and he was spooked. Like, I don't know what this is. Something's tracking me. He's hearing rustling in the woods, and when he would stop, it would stop. He's walking. He's getting down on his hands and knees. He's looking under all the thick brush to see if he can see anything. And when Dad would stop, it would stop, the sound. He gets up to walking, and then he can hear something walking through the brush around him. About a half-mile walk through a very narrow path in the woods that only one car can go in or out. So he gets to the top of the hill. The sun is starting to set, but he looks up and he notices that there's two of them. He sees these giant balls of fire that are maybe 100 or 200 yards away, just over the tree line, and there's two of them. And he's like, whoa, this is not right. I'm not supposed to see this. He's freaking out. He's like, he knows what's up. Nope, you're not supposed to see two suns. You know what I mean? It wasn't suns, obviously. So he turns to run, and then he turns and look back to see one more time, just to get another glimpse of it. And a third one shoots up. And then the next thing he remembers is he's back at the river. He had no knowledge of this. We understand that he had 4 hours of missing time because we had an entire documentary crew from the Discovery Channel come and do a full-blown investigation of us with CIA assets who were role-playing as MUFON, volunteers or whatever. But it's a long story there. But really, it was like a full-blown intelligence investigation. And they caught all the details, talked to the contractors, talked to my brother, talked to Dad. Dad had no idea that he had 4 hours missing time. He comes back, it's like 11 p.m. Now, why wouldn't he know what time it is? Well, because remember, people didn't always just have cell phones back then. We couldn't even afford them, and he's in the woods late at night fishing. He's not thinking to check the time. He's thinking it's the end of the world. Something's invading, and I'm seeing these crazy things. So we find out post-hypnotic regression, his memories started to come back to him of being gone. And what happened was, so I said he turns and he looks around, he sees a third one, and then he remembers being at the river. Well, what actually happened was it approached him. It just came to him, and he reached out and he could touch it. And when it was closer, he actually did a rendition of it. He worked with in 2008, he worked with the Discovery Channel CGI guy, and they did like a rendition of what he described. It kind of looked like a teardrop shape with like these spikes of light coming off of it. And when he was up close, they had like hexagon shapes on the end. It was like very geometric, this thing, but it was light. It wasn't some physical thing. It was just pure light. And when he reached up and he touched one of those spikes, I say spikes, but again, it's like waves of light coming off of it in geometric patterns. He reaches up and he touches it, and then next thing he knows, he's in a dark room. And there's 3 or 4 of these really tall 7 or 8 foot entities surrounding him, and it's just pitch black in there, and they're illuminated very slightly, and they're talking to him. My dad is freaking out, and they're like, Dad's like, "Where's Chris Jr.? Where's Chris Jr.?" They're like, He's all right. We're watching over him. Don't worry about him. We are the guardians. We serve creation. We've got some things to show you. So they basically explained to him that they have guided the evolutionary process throughout the ages, that they have created us, that they are from a spiritual dimension, that they serve the great force of creation and protect all life like it's a garden here or like a terrarium. They showed him how throughout the aeons, they've worked on creating different species of life. Like one of the things he saw was they showed him how it was like a dog with like a duck bill and like just different mixtures of genetic, I guess you could say, animals or whatever that didn't make the cut, for life here. And they said that they keep the darkness at bay, that they are basically picking him, that they took his, I know this is going to sound crazy. This is going to sound really way out there, but it is what it is. They said that they took his soul from another place very far away, that they brought it here, put him into his life, choosing his parents, and then they really do that for all of us, to be honest, that, our lives are totally preordained. It goes that deep back into the spirit world before we're born. Nobody's an accident, like we're all meant to be here. This is a very special place. They said they took his soul from a very far away place called Pomos, which is beyond Andromeda. They put him here to tell his story and to wake people up, and that they were going to help him along the way. They said that there is no obstacle in the physical world that they can't overcome. They can do anything that you can imagine in your tiny human brain. That's my words, not theirs. They said that they can walk through walls. They can vibrate.
That we can, or they can?
No, they can.
Okay.
I just like to put my own language on it,
Yeah.
But they said they can vibrate through the atoms in the wall. They can pop out of your light bulb. They can do anything. They can take, this is what they're telling my dad, they can take your soul out of your body while you're asleep on the couch at night and take you on a journey. They can do anything. People think that we're talking about, just physical aliens here. We're not. We're talking about omniscient, omnipotent, higher frequency beings that come from a dimension far above the material plane. They can do anything. And basically that they had been arranging events in his life leading up to this point so that he would have this experience, and then, kind of nudging him along to keep telling the story. And, we can go deeper into what happens next if you want, or
yes,
I feel like
please.
I'm floundering around here. Okay.
Oh no, I love this.
So they did tell him, this is, again, we're talking about the original 2007 experience here. They showed him that the governments of the world, the powers of the world, the human powers, that they're very afraid of these entities, terrified. And that's pretty obvious. It's common sense. But they said that they're terrified. They don't work with them, that they try to dominate them with force. And they kind of like, they indicated that like it's pointless. It's meaningless. Like they can't do anything, we do what we want. And it was like missile being shot at them and they just poof, it's gone. They can just, there's no weapon that can harm them. They are not physical. They are not material. You can't harm something that is not material with physical weapons, And they showed him, I don't quite understand what it means, but they showed him something about the sun. There's something special about the sun, like that they come from it, or that there's a portal in it, or something to that effect.
Like our sun?
Yeah.
Wow.
The sun. Yep. They showed him the pyramids in Egypt, that it had significance.
Ooh.
And then they brought him back.
It's related to the thing I was going to say earlier, but keep going because I'm loving this.
Okay. Well, don't forget that.
Okay.
Because we're going to go back to the pyramids here in the next part. Okay. So this, I know this is out there. So the people listening are like, what the heck?
No, but anybody who listens to my show, I mean, we're all out there. We're all very open to this information because I think we're all trying to figure out what the hell is going on here. So yeah, I mean.
So they take him back. Okay. Again, he had no knowledge of this. He just remembered being back at the river. It's important to say that when he first saw the balls of fire in the sky, he was terrified, as anybody would be. It's not like the movies where you're just like, going, the aliens invade and you're just showing up to fight. It ain't like that. You're traumatized. You like can barely breathe the first time you see something like that. Unless it's like you, when you come to our house and we're explaining it to you and prepping your mind, and then you see them gently appear in the sky, then it's like, oh, this is really cool. I enjoyed this experience. No, for us, it was like entities showing up in the room. You know what I mean? It was very
Which
like,
would be terrifying,
oh yeah, at
especially
first.
for a kid.
Yeah, exactly. At first it was very very jarring. We could say it was very mind altering. Um, anyway, so they take him back. My brother Chris Jr., remember the 7 to 8 foot tall entities that dad was with? They said, don't worry about Junior, we're watching over him. Well, simultaneously in real time, like not in whatever dimension they took dad to show him all these different crazy things, Junior was down in the woods. And dad had been missing for a few hours at this point. Junior was done fishing and he was like, "Oh man, I got to find dad." He's only like 17 too. He's a kid. He's he's not like my dad who just walks off in the woods. And Junior was worried. Okay, something's wrong. So he goes looking around. He gets to a certain part of the woods that's like the opposite direction from where my dad was. It's dark at this point, and he starts to see these red lights. These like kind of like little red orbs start bobbing through the woods toward him, off in the distance. We're talking pitch black, Avery, deep down in the woods. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Oh, yeah.
there's these strange lights, and he's like, "What the heck is that?" And as they get closer, and they're just kind of bobbing through the woods, the two lights split into four, and they get closer and closer, and he can see that they're these little 3 to 4 foot tall entities, and they kind of like were translucent, but they had red eyes that I don't know if you're I don't know if your listeners will see this on YouTube, but you'll find this interesting. Their eyes blink like one and then the other, kind of like a shutter, and it was very
It's like
terrifying.
mechanical.
It had a mechanical like sequence to it,
Oh, yeah.
and at any given time over the next 2 hours, roughly, one of these little entities was staring my brother in the eyes, while the other one was walking around picking up trash, a lot of beer cans out there from people partying and stuff like that. People that own the land out there, beer cans, Mountain Dew bottles, sticks. That one of them was picking them up and looking at them, and the other one's looking Junior in the eyes. And this entire duration, Junior was frozen. He couldn't speak. He couldn't move. He sat there for hours.
Like paralyzed by fear, or
paralyzed by them.
Paralyzed by them? Okay.
To keep him there safely. Because the entity said, we're watching over him. Don't worry about him. Okay. So dad gets back from the river. I mean, from being away from the river up to go where he saw the balls of fire. He comes back to the river calling out for Junior, Junior, Junior. And the second that dad comes down and they could all hear him and his voice was heard, the entities, they vanished. They went invisible. And Junior was free to move. And he ran to dad. He's hysterical. Oh my God, I saw these creatures, these aliens in the woods. And dad's at the same exact time. He's like, I've seen these UFOs. Oh my, they're freaking out. And then the three guys that were with him, they were grown men. They were contractors who worked with my dad. They were like, this is not funny. Like, you guys are messing with us. They had been searching for dad for 4 hours. They got in the truck. They drove all around. The fire was out. The fishing poles were packed up. Everybody was done. Like, they had been on a manhunt for dad for hours. And Junior was missing for a few hours. So they are flipping out. They're fighting, screaming at the top of their lungs, like, y'all freaking us out, this and that and the other. One of them says, look. And they look up in the sky, and there's like 8 or 9 very bright white lights up in the sky that look like stars. And they start doing this. Again, I don't know if your viewers can see, but they start scrambling around. And then a few of them shoot down over on the other side of the Cape Fear River and actually land over there and illuminate the woods around it. Now, imagine you're looking up at the night sky before there's Starlink, before there's all this stuff that we see now. I'm talking almost 20 years ago. Imagine you look up at the sky, the same sky you see every night, and then you see all the stars scramble around like that. That's like, talk about PTSD, talk about trauma, seeing things that your truly mortal eyes are not supposed to see. These guys were so hysterical. They slammed up in the truck. They are freaking out, arguing who gets to go home and see their wife and kids for the last time before it's the end of the world. Meanwhile, one of these little entities, the little 3 to 4 foot tall ones, it came up in the report from the contractors. My dad was driving, so he wasn't looking back. He was driving forward. One of the contractors and my brother corroborated it in the investigation. One of the little entities ran on all fours really fast and jumped up on the truck and grabbed onto it and then went invisible, and they didn't see it. So they get the guys home one
That
after the
would
other.
be so terrifying.
Well, it gets more terrifying. But okay, so Dad's driving out of there. He pulls a Dukes of Hazzard, and literally, like, the truck is airborne because he's driving out of this. This little narrow path in the woods is like it's an incline up a hill. He literally goes airborne over that hill, and then slams on the brakes when he gets on flat ground out of the woods to where the street entrance to this property is or whatever. And he gets out there and he slams on brakes because one of those big balls of fire with the spikes of light with the geometric patterns on it and it's spinning around and all this, it's hovering on the ground right in front of the truck, like won't let them pass, and it starts moving towards them. And they're like, oh my God. I mean, I can only, they are freaking out, like yelling, like, get us out of here, and it kind of moves. It lets them go by. I mean, I wasn't there. I didn't see it. I don't know if it went up over them or if it just, I don't know what it did, but it let them by. And about a mile down the road from this location, back in the 1980s, my father's first wife hit a dead man's curve too fast, and she actually died in his arms. And it was very traumatic. Dad was only like, I don't know, like 20 or 21 years old. And it was something that he never, I mean, he's got us now and my mom and all that, but you never really get over the traumatic loss of somebody as they die in your arms, and it was just a very, anyway. So one of those things appeared over that spot where she died. And it was so significant to my dad in that moment that he actually slammed on the brakes and stopped the car in the middle of the street just to sit there and look at it. He's not afraid anymore because remember, they took his fear away. Even though he couldn't remember the encounter he had on this thing, I just call it a light. He had no fear when he came back. So he stops and he's looking up and he's like, this means something. This has to mean something. Why are they over the spot where she died? Then all the guys are like, get the F out of here. What are you doing? So he hits the gas, gets them all home. He gets home with my brother. Remember, I just said earlier that me and my other two siblings and my mom, we were across town staying with my widowed grandmother to keep her company. So it's just my dad and my brother home. Flip on all the lights, grab all the guns, shut all the blinds, lock all the doors, and they are just like posted up like, this is it. This is the end of the world. They're thinking it's an invasion. Seriously. They're like, why aren't there Air Force jets and helicopters everywhere? What's going on? They start to hear the dog bark in the backyard. Junior is begging Dad, please don't go out there. Please don't go out there, please. And Dad's like, I got it. I got to, So he goes out there. He goes with my dog. The dog starts barking in the woods in our backyard, this wooded lot. Dad sicks the dog on it, goes through the bushes and chases something down. And Dad runs around. And when he gets to this other clearing in the woods, he freezes. He stops because he sees the same little 3 to 4 foot tall entity that my brother saw just hours before. He's face to face with one. And Dad's like, okay, you've got me. Like I'm done. It's over. And the being says, I forgot to mention, but when they communicate, they don't move their mouth. It's in your mind. And it says to him, you don't understand. We're not here to hurt you. We're here to help you. And then it disappeared. Okay, so then the next night, just fast forwarding and then ending the 2007 encounter, the next night, they start to see a light out in the yard. This time, my dad grabs a rifle. He's like, I'm going to go in this because I can't have my kids living in terror, Junior's freaking out. So he goes out there with a rifle. He goes and he starts crawling under this brush to go towards the light in the woods to see if he could kill this thing, because like I said, he's not scared of the woods. He's a hunter, this, that, and the other. And when he starts crawling towards this thing, he gets closer to it, and then he's face to face with it again. And he has this like flash that just like pulses through his being, and he just like drops the rifle. He didn't want to hurt it anymore. And it was this sensation that went through that like filled him with compassion for all life and all living beings. And he never hunted again. True story. He never hunted again. He doesn't kill bugs. He doesn't kill vermin, even rats, mice, nothing. He won't kill anything. They changed him. They like inculcated the deepest level of his being with a compassion and respect for all living things, just being face to face with this little entity. He was permanently changed.
Does he eat meat? I just
He
have
does. He
he
does eat
does.
meat.
Okay.
Yes. But he stopped hunting, and that's the big thing. I mean, my dad was that's a thing in the Bledsoe family. I mean, my family's been around here for hundreds of years. They're all hunters, fishers, avid. I mean, and then here you have me, the next generation, wearing anime t-shirts and playing video games and on the internet.
Right.
Everybody before me was like, 44 rifles out there shooting bear through the brain. Like, that's just what you do out here, tough country dudes. And my dad walked away from all that when he experienced these entities. And okay, so what happened next is do you want me to keep going on the story?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So he's like, imagine you experience something for the first time. It doesn't really count for you because you have experienced it now, so you know what it's like to see something. But imagine you haven't. Imagine nobody has, right? Imagine it's just a level playing field and all you have to go on is movies and TV and that's it. And you see something that you're not supposed to see or that you're told you should not see, that doesn't exist. And then you see it. What are you going to do? You're going to tell your peers. I saw this. You're innocent. You think they're going to believe you, but the reality is they don't. And actually, they hate you and they think you're crazy, a liar, a drug addict. You're possessed by the devil because you're saying, I saw this, I saw this. So Dad was so traumatized by the pushback that he got from saying that he experienced these things, and Junior too. He waited 10 months to report it. Like, just from telling his mom and dad, my grandparents, telling my mom, his siblings, and his friends and cousins, and like his little local community that, saying what he saw, they all treated him like he was just the worst piece of trash that you can fathom. Like, get away from me. I'm done with you. Like, you're crazy. Everybody.
You can even imagine too at that time. I mean, granted, now we're a little bit more open to the conversation, but back then it was extremely taboo.
Yes.
It was like something if you believed in it, you were crazy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he was so depressed. We spent every night, me and my dad and my siblings, whichever mix of us were there at that night that weren't busy. We would all sit around and we would watch those cheesy mid-2000s paranormal research shows and UFO shows like UFO Files with, I don't remember who hosted that one. And like UFO Hunter with Bill Burns. We watched them every night, like trying to learn what happened to us. You know what I mean? There's the internet still isn't really that viral of a thing back in this day, and we're just like watching these shows every night and something flashes on the screen. If you've had an experience, report it to MUFON.com. So 10 months after his initial encounter, Dad goes and reports to MUFON.com. Within just a couple months, between Dad turning them down over and over, immediately they're reaching out. We want to come to an investigation. Dad's like, no, I just wanted to get it off my chest anonymously. I didn't think anybody would want to come. Next thing you know, a few months later, we have a full-blown investigation. And less than a year's time, we had an entire documentary out on us by the Discovery Channel. And it was very traumatic because the people who headed the investigation on behalf of MUFON were actually CIA assets that we later were disclosed by some very high-level CIA officials. Program director Jim Simivan runs the clandestine division of the entire Central Intelligence Agency. He literally told me to my face in my backyard. He was like, they're low-level spooks. They were hatcheting your family to death. So sorry it turned out that way. Back in 2008, when the documentary came out, the UFO subject was highly classified. So they smeared us. It was they made us look like liars, like we're this, that, and the other, that we can't be trusted. And the fallout in our community was so vicious. I'm talking, we're going to school, us kids, we're getting laughed at, we're getting mocked. The day after the documentary came out, my teacher made me stand up in front of class and talk about it. The kids laughing at me.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I was 15 years old when that came out. And yeah, so it was vicious lashing out at us from this documentary, making us look bad. And the crazy thing is, when they came to us, they were telling us it's going to be the greatest story. It's going to, we believe you. We know you're telling the truth. They showed us all this evidence, like people in the 1950s and official government documents where people had drawn the same entities in the same craft, you could call it, like identical to my dad and my brother's descriptions. And they were like, we're going to tell the world the truth. This is it. And then when it aired, it was like, actually, like, we're liars. You see what I'm saying?
Right. So
So
your dad deals a lot with the CIA and NASA
to
right
this
now,
day,
right?
daily, yes,
So
daily.
is there some sort of division in the CIA? Like, is there different? I guess I'm trying to figure out if those were CIA assets and they strategically used your guys' story to manipulate it and look like you guys are crazy, but he also is working with um the CIA right now with the phenomenon. Is there, I
Well,
mean, how does that work?
let's put that into perspective. My dad is not
Okay.
working with the CIA. My dad is working with the phenomenon.
Okay.
People in the CIA or NASA or whatever intelligence agency they come to us from, they're learning from us.
Okay.
They're coming to us. They're investigating us. My dad just plays ball with whoever's nice and whoever wants to help out and spread the story. We have had some people who have come from the CIA or the DIA, which is a similar agency. Most people don't know about that one. Some have given us death threats. Some have cyber stalked us online, you name it. And then some of them, they're super cool. And I believe that they genuinely, from the bottom of their heart, want to spread this story. The example that I like to use with these intelligence agencies is like Stranger Things season 4. You've seen that?
Mm-hmm.
You remember when 11 was like, she lost her mojo and she had to go back to like covert psychic school because she had to get it back. And there's the one faction that's like trying to kill her, but then you got the other faction that's like, you could do this, you could do this. And they're still government people, but they're like helping her out. And then they're like at war with each other. And it's all about 11. She's this asset who's really this innocent civilian who was having these experiences that are out of her control. And the forces of the government are vying for her life.
Right.
That's the reality of it. It's not like CIA bad. It's like, no, CIA is this entity that has done a lot of bad, but also does good.
Have you ever heard of the Collins Elite?
Yeah, we've actually, yeah.
So
They've heard of us.
That kind of reminds me of that because apparently for my listeners, if you don't know what the Collins Elite is, it's like a faction within the
military.
The military that
generals.
That are Christian based that believe that these things are demons. And I haven't researched a ton into the Collins Elite, but
it's a waste of time because they're wrong.
Yeah,
they're wrong.
I mean, are they? Because are they out there to try and? Do you think that they're just doing that because of their own internal biases from their religious standpoint?
That's a great question, and I'm going to foreshadow a little bit because I was going to move on to the next part of the main reason why the CIA swarmed us. So here's a little spoiler there. There is an agenda at the highest levels of, I don't like to just say government because it's deeper than that, because there are organizations that exist above the government. You could think of it like a secret world government. A lot of people like to call it the Illuminati. A lot of people like to call it the 1%, the Bilderberg, the World Economic Forum, whatever you want to imagine in your head. If you want to grasp on to a certain label, that's fine. What really matters is we understand that there is a very small group of ultra powerful, ultra elite people who are making the decisions for the majority of mankind. Those are the ones responsible for putting out the negativity about the phenomenon.
Do you think it's to continue the control over the population?
Yes,
because if people knew the truth and the reality, they would lose control of everybody.
Yes. We would awaken our psychic faculties. Yes. If you don't like the word psychic, if somebody's Christian and they're offended by that word, that's fine. The Bible talks about having gifts of the Spirit. It's basically the same thing. We're just using a different language, a different word, psychic faculties, spiritual gifts, whatever. We would awaken them.
So that actually is interesting segue into what I want to talk about next, because the religious aspect of this is what really fascinates me, because I think that what a lot of people, even my listeners, are struggling with is trying to identify if this is good or if this is bad, and they're really coming from a standpoint from like a religious aspect, because people who come from a religious aspect believe, obviously, like anything that has to do with esoteric, any
Occult.
occult or any of that kind of stuff, they automatically place it. I mean, not everybody. Some people have various different belief systems, but there's a good amount of people out there that kind of tie anything like that to being malevolent, being
Yeah.
bad, evil, and that this is all being summoned by sorcerers and
Right.
dark
Right.
arts and all that kind of stuff, and that there is this agenda out there. And so I guess that's what I'm struggling with, because we live in a time right now where, you know, you talked about the pyramids, and
Yeah. I got more to say
somebody
on that too.
well, somebody had posted something on Instagram, and I'm going to read off the caption that they said, and it kind of made me think a little bit, because when we talk about like Jesus and Christianity and all that kind of stuff, those are pretty new religions.
Yeah.
When we think about how long we've been
Just
around.
one aeon, one
Yeah,
age it's been around.
right. And so it just, what he said was, when I get asked, "Are you religious?" my answer is usually directed with a question. The question being, where were all your chosen gods and prophets at the time the Great Pyramids were built? The ancient Egyptians had a religion. Why do you not worship that one? It was around way, way before your parents gave you your chosen religion. There is a God or higher power, but we don't know who or what that is. To think you've chosen the true one is where the term indoctrination came from.
Yeah,
Does that
that's
resonate with you at all?
that, especially that last part, to think you've chosen the true one, that's where indoctrination comes from. Yeah. Yeah, that resonates with me.
That was powerful for me, because when you think about it in terms of like how long some of these religions have been around, and then you think before that time, if the only way you can go to heaven is by believing in Jesus died on the cross for your sins, and that's the only way that you can enter heaven, then what was before that?
Exactly. Yeah,
How did
well,
you go to heaven before that? Why all of a sudden now afterwards there's only this one option?
I wish we had more time to go into this because, and I'm not saying I'm like, I'm not trying to, I've got some places I want to go, but this is some stuff that I cover in episode 1 of my podcast. And to breeze past this, it's like this. Imagine it's first century Judea. Let's just say it's 0. Yay, it's year 0. It's a new age. It's a new millennium. I'm sorry if you can hear my cat. She's being needy right now. Do you hear her?
Just
She's like,
slightly, but it's
she's
all good.
Yeah, she's very needy. But okay, so it's year 0. Woohoo! We're like very limited in our knowledge of the spirit world according to what we think in modern times, right? Well, what if they weren't? What if there was a secret lineage of mystics and esotericists throughout several cultures in the ancient Far East and, the West, like um, Tibetan Buddhism, or the Elysian mysteries of Greece, or the Zoroastrians of Persia, or the mystery, or you could say the Hermetic wisdom schools of Egypt. Scholars like Pythagoras, who were alive before the times of Jesus, who were traveling around all these cultures, learning about sacred geometry and frequency and vibration and the awakening of consciousness and trying to dream walk in the sleep state, all this amazing stuff. And then it's year 0. We're not supposed to know that much. If you study official religion, from the perspective that like Judaism and Christianity are like what's what, the idea is that there was no concept of a soul before Jesus came around. Oh, well, according to the Jewish timeline of their religion, all they had was this very limited concept of the afterlife and the soul, and it was something called like Sheol, and it's like this little garden that you go to when you die. They didn't really have this concept of heaven and hell and redemption and salvation and this and that and the other like we believe in modern times. That is not the case in first century Judea. And this man Jesus comes around. What if he was a member of some of these mystery traditions? What if he was an initiate into the You could say some people like to call it the Great White Brotherhood. That's a very controversial term. But what if he was an initiate and he had very high level knowledge on the mysteries of consciousness and life after death and the true nature of God? It's funny because if you count the number of times he said Amen in the Bible, it's well over 70, or the times that Amen is mentioned in the New Testament. And it's funny because, they say that means let it mean truly, but in reality, it comes from the name Amun Ra. You see all these depictions of Jesus throughout time with this solar disc above his head, and he's doing these mudras showing he's like this enlightened master of the mystery traditions. He's this solar entity, this Christ force. And I believe, based on what I've read and what I've experienced, that he was so wise and adept at transmitting these mysteries to the masses. Like I could totally see it in my mind going down this way, that he was, they say he had crowds of 5,000 and he's multiplying 5,000 fish. Whether he physically performed a miracle of multiplying fish or not, or is that esoteric symbology of Pisces and the fish and what that means according to sacred geometry. They killed him. The ones who killed him, the Romans, the Catholics, the ones who killed him are the ones who had all these conventions for the next 500 years, coming up with all the rules and regulations and restrictions on how to worship the dude that they killed. But the funny part is the dude was like, don't worship me. I'm just trying to show you the light. You know what I mean? And, it goes even deeper and deeper than that. You can get into the channeled material of Edgar Cayce, Dolores Cannon, who say similar corroborative, you could say, visions or whatever, that Jesus was a part of the mystical order, like the Essenes and the Hermetic alchemists and stuff like that. There's 18 years of time missing, in the Bible. For people who really study the Bible, they would know that he shows up. He has a crowd of people when he's 12. Then he dips out, peace. And then he shows up at 30 and he's like, all right, let's wake them up. Let's do our ministry. What happened in those 12 years? Right? Well, there are records that popped up in Russia and other countries that say, wow, we had somebody named Saint Issa who checked into the monasteries in Tibet, who was a Jew who was performing miracles in front of crowds. Or what about the Gnostic documents that came up in the 1950s in clay pots in Egypt, and Edgar Cayce in the 1940s was having these psychic visions saying we're about to find all these texts and this and that and the other. And they find the Dead Sea Scrolls very shortly after that, and then the Gnostic Scrolls, and they have different accounts of Jesus and what was really going on in the time back then. So anyway, we can move on. My point is, I don't accept the mainstream religious thing. I think there's something a lot deeper to it that we're slowly awakening to. I think in reality, it has to do with the wisdom traditions of Atlantis. There's this original neutral knowledge that's I think I told you about this on the phone. It's like the 7 Hermetic laws that have been taught for aeons and aeons and aeons in secret. And now they're coming out because of the power of the internet. Everything is vibration. Everything is the mind. Everything is just, people can look up the 7 Hermetic laws. That's what I think it's all about.
That's fascinating to me, because I've been on this existential crisis for a long time. And I feel like the way that I grew up, and I grew up Catholic, and then I turned, after in my 20s, I turned to a very devout Christian. And I did Bible studies, I didn't cuss. I was very, very devout for a long time, and then I went through a really hard time in my life and was like, why would God do this to me? I've been so subservient to him, and all these things, and it kind of made me start questioning my religion. But then there's always been just this base that pulls at me, where it's like, don't do that, don't think about that, because you could go to hell.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where I've just been exploring and trying to figure out what my foundational belief system is. And it's just questions like that, what I just read, that make me really start to think about, when we look at how humans are just extremely flawed. We have very powerful people, even just in our government, that have strategically done things to gain more power and control over the people. And you have to kind of take that into consideration when you think about a lot of these religions and how religion has also been used as a weapon against people, and how, you know, they have done mass genocide throughout history against people that were claimed
Millions
to be
killed
evil.
in the name of
Yes.
Catholicism. Millions.
Yes. And there's so much that you look into and you're just kind of like, how can that be done in the name of God? You
Christ
know?
was like, turn the other cheek if someone slaps you in the face.
Right.
Right? Isn't that a little weird that they're killing millions in the name of Catholicism throughout the last 2,000 years? But
Right.
Christ was like, you know, be humble, be merciful and meek, and be a pacifist and don't hurt anybody. Where's the connection there?
Right. And when you also think about it too, is a lot of these people say that, you know, they're getting this information from God, that they, you know, they're the prophets, they have a communication with God. Everyone else needs to listen to them because they're the ones who are getting this information from God. And then you look at the Bible and how Jesus was, and Jesus never ever ordered anybody to be slaughtered, murdered, killed. Like, I mean, you look at the things that he did, and a lot of the stuff that he says is exactly the opposite of what a lot of these
Happens
people are doing
today.
in the name of
Yeah.
God, right? So obviously there's darkness, and then there's light in this world, and sometimes it can be convoluted because we are trying to figure out the source in which it's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question that one of my listeners had, and it was concerning the dog situation with your dad, where the dog, I mean, did he know how the dog's, was it his throat got slit?
No, it wasn't the throat; it was the neck. But
Okay.
you know, like top of the neck. So what exactly was the question?
Did So they had a concern that if the entities or the phenomenon did that and then allowed him to have that power to heal the dog, they were concerned that that just seems like it's like a big flex to be able to do that to a dog and then have the dog come back to be healed to kind of prove a point, if that makes sense. They in their mind they thought, how is that like a good energy, right? Like, how is that coming from something good? So I wanted to get your perspective on that.
I can't remember which Old Testament figure it was because admittedly I was way more interested in the New Testament. But there is, I think it's Jacob. I want to say it's Jacob. And he's on this mountain and he wrestles with this guy overnight. And then he, like literally all night, they're like wrestling through the night. And this being, this entity, just dislocates his hip, just totally F's him up, you know? And he's in this agony and it's revealed to be God. And God, you know, explains these mysteries to him and then heals him and moves on. So it's like, I don't know. Like this stuff has been happening for thousands of years. I'm not sitting here questioning the intention of why this entity cut my dog's neck. I'm just saying, damn, like it happened, mind blown, move on, you know? And it's
Yeah.
like if we want to like weigh peanuts to peanuts, it's like, sure, the one thing that the phenomenon has done around our property that people could speculate was an evil act just by nicking our dog's neck, which, you know, it was pretty okay afterwards. Sure, you know, people could say that and they can question all they want. But let's talk about the dozen plus people who have come to our house or we've gone to see them and they've seen the phenomenon and then their cancer is gone within a week, eyesight healed, stroke symptoms gone. My buddy Tom Barber, very good friend of mine, he's the vocalist of Chelsea Grin and Darko. His back was healed when he came out.
Wow.
And so many different things, miracles that people can't fathom. The stuff that people have read about for thousands of years, I've seen them with my eyes. I've seen these beings do so many wondrous things, and the things that they have done for us, I don't question their intention. You know, I understand somebody who hasn't experienced this and wants to try to understand would say, well, actually, they nicked your dog's neck, so maybe they're not so good. Well, actually, it's just not that simple. It's not black or white. We're talking about an entity that comes from a higher dimension, and the great cosmic span of lives between lives, how many thousands of lives each of us have incarnated here through different egos in each life. One little nick on the neck of a puppy that really doesn't even have that hyper advanced of a consciousness, and it's sitting there wagging its tail the whole time, and it's not even that, distressed. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like it's probably not that insidious of an act considering how it turned out
Right.
at the end of it, Like, that's just my 2 cents.
And I think that the context is important too, because putting in a context of like the dog's throat got slit and it died and then he healed it and it came back was not
That didn't happen.
was not the reality. And
no, it's just a little nick on its neck and it's gushing blood, and it's sitting there, and then he puts his hand on it and the nick is gone and the blood is not gushing anymore. Like, it wasn't that fatal,
Yeah.
I've walked by the cabinet and nicked my arm.
Yeah. I think context is important in that, because I've heard some stories going around it being talked like that. And so I think having that context is important for the listener to understand the situation. There was another one that was interesting to me because, so I guess at one point in the book, your dad visits either NASA or the CIA. I can't remember, but he is instructed that when he walks past these black
NASA.
squares, that when he walks past these black squares, alleging that these things are from like an extraterrestrial origin or something like that, he is told to sing a song in his head so that as he walks past these boxes, that these things don't get into his head. What? Like, is that a different thing?
That is a different thing. They're conflating two stories from the book. Okay. So, okay, there were two instances where that was recommended to my dad to sing a song in his head. The first one was when he was talking to this gentleman from NASA. Actually, it was the same guy in both instances. And he comes out to investigate us unofficially, if that means anything to anybody, because he's covert, So he comes out and he investigates us. He briefs us. He shows us all this material on his laptop. He talks to us about Area 51, flashes of CIA and Air Force and NASA and NRO badges and all this. He had an Area 51 clearance too. And he's telling us, all this stuff that's mostly in the book. And then there's this time where he's contacted by my dad, because dad's going to go with like a paranormal investigator to go through the woods to investigate this, so to speak, haunted house or something like that was like 30 or 40 minutes from our actual house. And this guy's like, well, if you're out there in the woods and you want to get closer to an entity, if you're curious about how you could potentially get closer to one, try reciting a song in your head, because it's much harder for anything to read your mind if you're reciting lyrics in your head. Pick a song that's about 4 minutes in length that you know the words really well, and then, recite it over and over, and you might actually have some better luck capturing something because it can't read your mind. Not capturing, but like photo, like capturing, seeing something. And then he goes to NASA. I don't think that box was indicated to be of alien origin. It was just indicated that it was an advanced exotic technology that could read minds. I think there was a conflating of two stories there. And again, it's the same advice. So like, if you don't want your mind read, then repeat a song. But I don't really pay much attention to these intelligence people and what they're warning us of and telling us what to do. I just assume like the majority of it, it doesn't matter anyway. I don't care, because we deal with the phenomenon. I don't really care
you guys have
what they're up to.
All this experience with it.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And so whatever they're talking about is completely different than the experience that you guys are experiencing.
Right.
And I guess that's where I have, we have the government coming out talking about how they have biologics, they have UFOs, they have, there's a crash retrieval program. And so when we talk about physical matter that's like coming here and crashing and that we have bodies and all this kind of stuff, that's something that sounds completely different than what you're talking about. Because how can you obviously can't capture what you're talking about? So
you can't.
Do you think that that's a lie, or
yes?
Okay.
I never got to the I went on a tangent about the mystery schools of ancient Egypt and Jesus and all that, but is it okay if I go? It'll relate to this question if I go.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so the experiences of 2007 happened, all that documentary came out. So over the next 5 years, we're being viciously shunned, hated, reviled. But the good news is Facebook was popping, especially around 2008. Farmville came out. Oh my God, Facebook blew up and people were just, um,
All
connecting
the
like crazy.
games.
Yeah, you remember
Yeah.
Farmville? You remember
Oh
that?
yeah. That was the only reason why I got on Facebook was for
Exactly.
Farmville and then the games. Like nobody cared about people's profiles and stuff like that. We
Yeah,
just wanted games.
that's what I'm saying. And like people who are young, like younger than we are, they don't get what that world was like back then,
No.
And anyway, so
The good old days of social media.
that's right. So Facebook starts popping off in 2008, and Dad is getting inundated with locals and just people in general around the world who saw the Discovery Channel documentary, and they were reaching out. Dad was getting contacted by hundreds, if not thousands of people, even back then. Now it is beyond fathom how many people are messaging my dad. I mean, it's insane. And anyway, so he was in this phase where for those first 5 years of dealing with this, he would allow small crowds to come and just hang out. And it's just like everybody else out there that I know in the town or my family and friends, they hate me. They don't want anything to do with me. So I'm just going to go meet the people online who are nice and they want to come out and they believe. So we went through several years of like entertaining groups and crowds, and any paranormal investigator or CIA or NASA or whatever, they were all welcome, open door, come on. And there was one point in time where we had people camping in our yard in tents, and not everybody in those days saw something. It started picking up for more public audiences to see a few years later, but there were some times where people would see a flash and they're just all sobbing hysterics and their lives are changed forever, and it's like this amazing thing. But on the other side, everybody's still hating us and being so awful. So it's this just really kind of tough time. So 2012 comes around. My dad finally decides he's sick of it. He can't handle his children coming home from school crying because they've been mocked. Or, my sister was younger at the time too. She was still in school at this point, and he just decided, I'm done. I'm never talking about this again. I am officially done. That was Easter Sunday. Yeah, so that was the night of Easter in 2012. He's like, I'm done. He goes to bed that night, and he wakes up at 3 a.m. to a deep masculine voice, and it says, arise. And he wakes up, and he's instructed to get dressed and go outside. And he does, and those entities, not the little tiny 3 to 4 foot tall ones, but the taller ones that he saw on the light vessel, they're in the backyard waiting for him. And they hand him this object. And this is where we get really into bizarre dimensional territory that I invite people to really open their minds and listen without judgment. Because again, we're talking about entities from a higher frequency here. They hand him this object that looks like the torso of a dog. It has no legs, no head, no tail. It just has like a torso. It's like this little fleshy thing, but it's spiked all around. And as he's holding it, it's gnashing at him and it's clawing at his hands and it's hurting him. And the beings are like, this is your burden. Do not lose this. You have to keep this. So he goes walking through the woods with it, and he's holding this thing and it's gnashing at him. And he walks through our yard. He gets back to, we have this big L-shaped kennel where like a dozen or two hunting dogs would stay full time, because again, my family were huge into hunting. And he goes out there and he throws this thing in the kennel and he locks it up. And he feels this gush of wind, turns around, and a massive ethereal, meaning ghost-like for those who aren't aware, bull charges through my dad. He said it felt like a great gust of wind. He gets knocked onto his back. He rolls over to get up. And when he's on his hands and knees and he starts looking up, he sees this lady that's about 4 foot tall. Like her body is about 4 foot tall, but she's floating several feet off the ground, and she's glowing light, and she has blonde hair, blue eyes. She has a white gown that goes from her neck all the way down to her ankles. She's barefoot. It twinkles like the stars. It's like dazzling. And she says, you know why I'm here? Here's a depiction of her for those who are watching. You can see her kind of over there.
I love it.
Yeah. But she says, I'm here. This is your burden. You know, you can't give up. You got to tell your story. And my dad's just swept with this guilt. He's like, man, just hours ago, I said I was never going to talk about this again. I swore it off. And, the meat and potatoes of what she said was, I'm just going to summarize it. I've covered it extensively on the podcast. Dad has written about it in the book. There's all kinds of material out there in great detail, saying how this went down in sequence. I'm just going to give the bullet points of everything that she said. She said, we're approaching the age of Aquarius, that the age of light is returning, that the light is going to step in and they're not going to allow the dark to harm us, but only so far. That there is a very dark, evil group at the top of humanity who is scripting the book of Revelations to play out so that the masses will live in panic and hysteria, and that we would manifest a cataclysm because of our fearful vibration reaching critical mass. And that it's important that the truth of these beings and that the light is spread so that we would shift the vibration of human consciousness from this hysterical, paranoid, fearful state to love. She said that at the great scheme of things, there's only fear and there's only love. These are the two original polarities, and that she was the manifestation of love, that she is the divine mother, that she created all life throughout the cosmos, and that she's existed since time, before time was a concept, that she is the great secret missing part of the Holy Trinity, that the truth is that was blotted out from humanity by the Catholic empire to keep us in mental and spiritual slavery, that the great truth is that the Holy Trinity actually represents the Father, the Mother, and the Son. Naturally, we are all the Son. That's the great mystical truth, right? We are all the children of the divine. We all can awaken to Christ-like consciousness. But anyway, moving on from that. So she said that she is known by many names throughout the ancient past, but that he could call her Hathor, which gives that Egyptian association.
Interesting.
And she said that the hidden one is Amun-Ra, and that she is in charge of all of these entities, that they serve her, that she is the great mother of all life everywhere, period. And that we are returning into balance with the great divine feminine, that when this balance is restored, that we would be in the age of Aquarius. It would be a new age of light and peace, and that a new knowledge would return. And that as a species, we have to pay attention to our thoughts. We have to always try to align our thoughts with light, love, positivity, all the Christ consciousness stuff. I know not everybody, can I cuss on your show?
Yeah.
I know not everybody fucks with Christianity like that, and that's cool. But the point is, it doesn't take a dummy to see that Christ consciousness is real and that it's valuable. And she basically said it's about love, it's about humility, it's about being a kind and gentle soul. We have to all treat each other that way. We have to be that way inside and out, and that's how we save the world. It's up to us. And that the elites, whoever these people are, she didn't call them the Illuminati or whatever. She said that they're not going to win because it's been prophesied for many years that the light would return, but that their agenda is ultimately, the end game is that they are going to portray the phenomenon in a negative light in order to try and convince people that it's about aliens and that there is no God, there is no spirit, there is no afterlife. This great alien agenda, it really started ramping up in the late 1960s. The phenomenon indicated to my dad that it really all began. I mean, you can look in the and when we started going to the moon, and we start NASA, which we know a lot of Nazi scientists came started NASA. We all know that, right?
Yeah.
Operation Paperclip after World War II. I mean,
Yeah.
come on, think a little out of the box, people.
Right.
So when they did the space race and all that in the 1960s, and they start building this this great idea of we're in this infinite void and we're on a dusty ass floating rock through this cosmic void of insignificant nothingness with balls of hot gas perfectly precise distance away so that the atomic elements can kind of gestate in this soup of this, that, and the other to create this accidental bullshit that we're here. That's the plan. That's the agenda, is to try to convince us that we're nothing, we're an accident, we're not special. It's all this scientific Star Wars, Star Trek, blah, blah, blah. But the reality is the spiritual. she said that we are in a very perilous place, that it's akin to, like, I mean, hell. If you think about it, we come here and we suffer, and the soul suffers, and we learn and we grow, and it's the great journey of our soul's evolution back towards higher consciousness. And she said that they exist in the invisible, spiritual, eternal dimension, that they come and they go as they please, and they guide us, and that when we die, we all go there. We all go into an orb of light, and that we never ever die. We are eternal beings, every one of us. Me, you, everybody listening, everybody else that's not listening. We are eternal beings, so that when we die, we go into these orbs of light, and we are free. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think. She said the Earth is a living being. It is a great evolved consciousness, and we are symbiotically attached to its vibration. So the reason a cataclysm could or would manifest, which it won't, because they said the light will win, is that us on the collective, like if you consider all of us externally existing on Earth, all of our combined fearful vibration harms the Earth so bad that it's encoded to shake us off and destroy us, to protect itself, which is why it's
Is that why
so
we have so much when they talk about climate change and all these things? I
all
wonder if
manufactured.
like how I mean everyone can feel the state of where the world is right now,
Hmm.
and then you also see all this I mean, granted it depends on what your belief system is on if you believe in climate change or what, but you could definitely see that there's an uptick in a lot of things, whether people think that it's been done strategically for a purpose and that these higher, this the Illuminati or whatever you want to call them has created this in order to get people on board
They're
to believe
spraying
in
the
climate
sky.
change. Yeah. I mean, and they also, I mean, there's been proof of weather manipulation and stuff like that. But I also wonder too, just based off of what you're saying, is that part of this whole
Yes,
thing?
yes, yes, absolutely, all of it, all of it. And
That is
it's
so fascinating.
I like to focus on the light, but the reality it's pretty dark sometimes too. What they're doing to us, they're feeding us all this poisonous, nasty food. It's all this push of psychotropic drugs to I go to the doctor and say I'm really sad, and they're here, take this pill, but don't read the side effects. This or you might want to kill yourself, and it's this everything is messed up. We're sick, we're unhealthy, we are in mental and spiritual slavery by this small group of people who are over the whole world, and it's really sick. Like when you open your eyes and you wake up to what's going on, it's like we need the light more than ever. But she said, it's like it's good. She's not going to let this go on, but only for so long. And then the thing she said, she showed Dad the pyramids again, and she showed him the Sphinx, and she said that when the Great Sphinx at Giza aligns with the star Regulus just before dawn, like a perfect harmonic alignment with the gaze of the Sphinx and the star Regulus in the constellation Leo, that we would shift into a new knowledge and we would awaken, all of us.
Wow. Unbelievable.
Some people speculate that that alignment will happen in 2026.
How do you feel? Like
Um,
what do you think? Or are you just
what
open?
do I think it'll happen in 2026? Yeah, I think so, because some of our, you could say, associates or acquaintances or whatever at NASA with their advanced simulators, they ran that alignment, and multiple different people have found that alignment to be in the year 2026, which is really crazy because you said earlier, what about religion before Jesus, right? Well, there were a few of them. One of them being Hinduism. It's about 5,000 plus years old. And their tradition, it's very cool. It's very misunderstood. And also, it was orally transmitted for thousands of years before it was written down in the Bhagavad Gita and the Rig Vedas and all that. And they had a very advanced star cycle system called the yugas. And the way they explained it is that the universe is in these great cosmic seasons. And right now we're in the fourth and final phase of this cycle of civilization, which is the Kali Yuga. Kali is this dark goddess. It's all metaphorical, of course. She's depicted as having necklaces and skirts with literal like baby bones and severed arms and severed skulls. She's depicted as pure evil, like the complete absence of goodness and this and that and the other. So they said that we're in this cycle with this association, that we are completely detached from the light of God and higher consciousness. We are in the dark. We are in the dark ages spiritually, basically, and it goes deeper than that. But according to their ancient system of these cosmic seasons, the dark period ends in 2025. So I'm just saying, like, I don't know. There
It all
might be
kind of just
something.
lines up.
It all kind of just lines up. Yeah, there's a lot that just kind of lines up.
Well,
And
yeah, when you look at religions across the board, just a lot of the stories that they tell, it's almost like they're seeing the exact same thing and in speaking it in different terms.
yeah,
And
exactly.
we're all interpreting it differently based on language, which obviously I mean, we're human, and so perception, there is no reality, there's only perception. And so we can all see the exact same thing and perceive it in various different ways based on our own programming and our own, environment and things like that, our belief systems. But when you really like look at stuff across the board, even science, when you look at science and what it's starting to discover about our world, I literally look at all of that stuff as like, oh yeah, that just explains this, and this is explaining the exact same thing as this. And it's almost like everybody is saying the exact same thing, they're just putting different words, different labels on it. And it's making everybody divisive because they want to be the right ones. And it's like, I really feel like all we're doing is just explaining the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to me. I mean, with that knowledge that you just said, we're entering into a new age
of light.
What's the outcome? Like,
peace.
I mean,
The
how is that
awakening
going
of
to
our
change?
spiritual gifts. Well, it's dimensional. So people don't really put enough thought into the influence of these big balls of light up there in space that really none of us have been up there and seen, except for a small select group of NASA people who say they've actually been up there, right? And all the videos that they put up, I don't know. I've never been up there. I don't know if we can physically go there. I wonder if maybe they're these very highly advanced conscious entities. If you think about like the way that the beings or the phenomenon described it to my dad, they said that the Earth, it's a living being. It's not a big old rock like we're made to believe. It's a soul. It's a consciousness. And it's like, if you understand the greatest phrase, I know we talked about this, but this is for the listener. If someone had a gun in my head and it was like, what's the most advanced spiritual thing that you could say if you had, if you wanted to convince people of something really profound or mystical or esoteric, I would say as above, so below. If you're somebody who is interested in understanding the deeper mysteries of the spiritual world and how it works, it is as above, so below. As within, so without. That comes from the Lord's Prayer. Jesus, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. But what that's been taught to mean for the last several thousand years by these secret initiatory wisdom traditions all around, the East and the West and the ancient past, it means that the dimensions of the higher spiritual plane and the lower spiritual plane exist in an entangled web of correspondence, meaning the things that happen in the higher spiritual realms, we are experiencing here as a fractal, or you could say a microcosmic reflection or a mirror image. So the fact that we all have a human body and fingers and toes and senses to reach out and interact consciously with other bodies around us, and we have this advanced, extremely unfathomably advanced central nervous system and the trillions of neurons in the brain. It's like a universe inside of us, right? Almost like the nebulae and the galaxies at the higher cosmic levels. All of reality is encoded to be a fractal. People are tripping on psychedelics and they're seeing all these spinny spirals and all that. There's something to that. And if you get into sacred geometry, you can find a couple of mathematical codes that are present in all life that grows throughout the planet. because there's an intelligent mind that's dictating everything. Everything emanates originally from the spiritual world and then is made manifest in the physical world. This is a knowledge that we've forgotten as a species, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So if we are all walking around here, you could say, what do planets do? They attract or they repel. That's gravity, right? Magnetism and gravity. So all these planets are, so to speak, gravitating towards the sun with this precise connection, or, you know, bodies are being magnetically repulsed. That's almost like, if you imagine metaphorically in the human experience, if we were all like a mirror image of the higher celestial bodies down here on the manifest plane, that would make sense in the way that we love people and attract them to us, or the way we repel them magnetically, right? We repel them through fearful actions like hatred or anger or jealousy or envy or whatever, you know? So like that's the thing, is like, we are the microcosm of the great macrocosm. We are tiny fractal little sparks that are little metaphorical ignorant reflections of the higher God mind, you know? So I
We
don't remember
are
how I got on that, but
light matrix. It's like a light
yes,
matrix.
yes. We
Now,
are light beings. That's the whole point. It's not about seeing lights in the sky. Oh, cool, I saw it. No. They're coming here to awaken us to what we really are. The great secret and the mystery of the UFO subject and the phenomenon, it's really about us awakening to be back to our original state.
so do you think the book of Revelation is going to go down as it was written?
Pretty close, yeah. I think it's impossible for it to be perfect because, you know, they use a lot of words that are 2,000 years old that we don't really have any context for in today's society. But yeah, I think it'll be very close. I think we're already seeing it play out.
So I guess if they come and awaken, I mean, in the book of Revelation, it talks about how there's going to be people who accept Jesus and go to heaven, and then there's going to be a lot of people who die. I mean, what what do you perceive in that? Do you think that this force is going to come, and the people who believe in the government and their narrative and go along with them are pretty much dooming themselves to death? Or how do you see that whole scenario? Like, you hear about the great rapture. I mean, there's
Yeah.
very many different ways of like how people interpret the book of Revelation, but
hmm
in your, I mean, it's very clear that there's going to be this judgment day and all this kind of stuff. What's your interpretation, just based on now your view of religion and this phenomenon? How do you view the book of Revelation and the way things are going to play out?
I think prophecies are like a guide stone of what is possible. And I think that they only come true if we collectively manifest them. It's like the story of Palm Sunday. I can't remember exactly which gospel. Maybe it was Luke. Um, it's, you know, Palm Sunday is the Sunday before Easter, and it's called that, and it's celebrated as that because I can't remember what city either. I haven't read the New Testament in a few years. But Jesus gets up to one of these cities in Israel, you know, but ancient Judea. And he has a little blurb in there, you know, a little text in there that's like, you know, in order to fulfill the prophecy, it was believed that the Messiah or the Savior would ride in on an ass being heralded by palm trees. So he said, all right, get me a donkey. Like, I'm going to fulfill the prophecy. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, Jesus consciously said, I'm going to fulfill this prophecy. It didn't just like happen by accident and he caught himself, you know, oh shit, I just realized I'm on a donkey. No. He said, the prophecy says this, therefore I am going to do this. And I believe that's the way that it works. And I don't think that we are destined to experience a fate that was written for us against our will. I think we have a choice. And it's like my dad was told by these beings, the light is only going to allow us to suffer for so long. They're going to step in if it goes too far. And ultimately, the way we're saved is if we, down on the human level, awaken to this knowledge by free will and our choice, and we realize it's up to us to treat people better and be Christ-like. Now, when I say Christ-like, I have to specify here. I don't mean be a Christian and go to church and worship Jesus the sage. I don't mean that. I mean fucking be Christ-like. Just be it. It's not about believing this or believing that. It's about having the knowledge that you are a fractal image of God, and therefore your actions matter because you are harming other divine beings when you act fearfully and negatively. It's
Right.
an awakening to who we truly are in our relationship with the divine, the higher realms.
That's so fascinating. I mean, I could talk about this stuff like all day long, and I'm sure we'll have a lot more conversations because I have a lot more questions. But
Yeah, sure.
I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up for today. This has been like an amazing episode because I think when I talked to your dad, we didn't go as in depth as you did in a lot of the scenarios. So you kind of pieced in a lot of the missing pieces that I think is really important for my listener to hear in your guys' story because I think everyone's trying to understand what's going on right now,
Mm-hmm.
especially with this becoming more mainstream. And we all think that right around the corner, something's going to happen. And I think we're all trying to figure out how we should be perceiving this and how we should be moving forward. And so that's the journey that I'm on. I think that's the journey that what a lot of people are on. And so I really appreciate you coming on my show and sharing your story, your perspective. And I hope that, I mean, you're going to keep sharing your story. And I hope
Yeah.
that it impacts a lot more people like it's impacted me. And I'm really looking forward to coming up and seeing you and being on your
Likewise.
show uh and yeah, I love your family. Your dad's amazing.
Thank
You're
you.
amazing. So I have nothing but positive things to say about you guys. So
Thank you so much. Man, we didn't
absolutely.
even talk about your experiences here. I'm
Yeah.
sure you did with Dad, though, right?
Yes, I
Okay,
did. And then
cool.
I also did another show where I went really in depth on it too, which is going to be released. It just released it like as we're recording this, it just released on Monday. And this episode's coming out to kind of explain that episode. Um, so yeah, I mean, this is great. I love this conversation. This is
Thank
exactly
you.
the kind of stuff that we all, I feel like it's just so important to have these conversations
Yeah.
because there's so much knowledge and there's so much information out there. And we can sometimes put our blinders on to things that contradict our own internal belief systems. When we do that, we end up missing a lot of really vital things that can really put us on a better track in life, you know?
Hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, thank you so much, Ryan, for coming on my show.
Thank you.
And this has been an amazing conversation. So, one more time, where can my listeners find you?
Okay, so we're very easy to find. It's all Bledsoe Said So across the board. Twitter, or I guess it's X now. X, Instagram. We do have a TikTok. I'm kind of trying to get more comfortable using that. And this is a little bit of curveball here. If people have made it to the end and they're really vibing and they want to see some more stuff, I do have a pretty sweet heavy metal band. I'm the drummer, and then my podcast co-host is the he's the guitarist, the bassist, the producer, the audio engineer, the vocalist too, and it's just two of us, and it's called Twice Born. So if you like heavy metal, check us out.
Love it. All right. Well, I'll put everything in the show notes for you guys so you guys can check Ryan out, check out all the links that he has. Make sure to go and follow him, take a listen to his podcast. And this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Thank you.
All right. See you later, guys.